What happens when one of the most respected news anchors in America decides to ambush a global superstar with the most personal, invasive questions imaginable? What happens when professionalism goes out the window and a live television interview turns into a brutal interrogation? Well, you're about to find out because Jennifer Lopez just experienced the most humiliating moment of her entire career, and it was all caught on camera. Before we dive into this absolutely shocking exchange, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think really went down here. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for every single word of this, because what George Stephanopoulos did to Jennifer Lopez on Good Morning America this morning will leave you absolutely speechless. The green room at Good Morning America was buzzing with its usual pre-show energy. Jennifer Lopez sat in the makeup chair, her team making final touches to her already flawless appearance. She was there to promote her latest business venture, a new skincare line that had been months in the making. It was supposed to be a standard celebrity interview, the kind she had done hundreds of times before. 5 minutes to air, Miss Lopez, called out a production assistant, clipboard in hand. Jennifer nodded, checking her reflection one last time. Ready as I'll ever be, she said to her publicist Maria, who was standing nearby with a nervous smile. Remember, keep it light, keep it positive. Talk about the skincare line, maybe touch on the new music, but nothing too personal, Maria whispered. Of course, Jennifer replied, though something in the back of her mind felt uneasy. She had noticed George Stephanopoulos seemed unusually distant during their brief pre-interview chat. There was something in his eyes, a coldness she hadn't expected from the veteran anchor. The walk to the set felt longer than usual. The bright studio lights hit her face as she took her seat across from George, who was shuffling through his notes with an intensity that made her stomach tighten slightly. Good morning, everyone. I'm George Stephanopoulos, and we're here with the one and only Jennifer Lopez, George began, his voice carrying its familiar, authoritative tone, but there was an edge to it that viewers at home might not have caught. Jennifer, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me, George. I'm excited to talk about my new skincare line and some of the projects I've been working on, Jennifer replied with her trademark smile, settling into what she assumed would be a comfortable conversation. Yes, well, we'll get to that, George said, his eyes never leaving his notes. But first, I think our viewers would be interested in discussing some of the more pressing matters surrounding your personal life. Jennifer's smile faltered just slightly. This wasn't the direction they had agreed upon. Oh. Well, I'm really here to focus on my business ventures today. I understand that's what you'd prefer, George continued, his tone becoming more pointed. But surely you can appreciate that our audience deserves transparency from public figures like yourself. The word transparency hit like a warning shot. Jennifer felt her publicist shift uncomfortably in the wings, and she could almost hear Maria's sharp intake of breath from off-camera. I've always been transparent with my fans about what matters, Jennifer replied carefully, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. That's actually part of why I'm so passionate about this skincare line. It's about authenticity and helping women feel confident in their own skin. Speaking of authenticity, George interrupted, setting down his notes and leaning forward with a predatory focus. Let's talk about your recent romantic relationships. Specifically, the pattern of very public relationships followed by very public breakdowns. The studio fell silent except for the hum of cameras. Jennifer's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her media training kicked in. George, I think we're getting off track here. I came to discuss my business. But isn't your personal life your business? George pressed, his voice taking on a prosecutorial tone. You've built a career partly on being America's sweetheart, the woman who believes in love. Yet you've been engaged 6 times to 5 different men. Don't you think the public has a right to question whether this is authentic or simply a marketing strategy? Jennifer's eyes flashed with something dangerous. The comment about her engagements was a direct hit, and George knew it. Her hands, perfectly manicured and folded in her lap, tensed slightly. My personal relationships have nothing to do with my professional accomplishments, she said, her voice maintaining its composure but with an underlying steel that wasn't there before. I think it's inappropriate to reduce a woman's worth to her romantic history. I'm not reducing your worth, George replied with false reasonableness. I'm simply pointing out the discrepancy between your public image and your private choices. You sing about love, you act in romantic comedies, you sell this idea of finding the one, yet your track record suggests otherwise. My track record suggests I'm a human being who has experienced love and loss like millions of other people. Jennifer shot back, her professional mask beginning to slip. The difference is, I don't get to grieve or heal in private. But you choose not to heal in private, don't you? George continued his assault. Every relationship is a media spectacle. Every breakup becomes an album or a movie or an interview tour. At what point does genuine emotion become performance? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Jennifer stared at George for a long moment, and viewers could see the exact second she realized this wasn't going to be the interview she had prepared for. This was an ambush, plain and simple. Are you seriously questioning the authenticity of my emotions on live television? She asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more weight than if she had shouted. I'm asking questions that I think reflect what many people are wondering, George replied, completely unmoved by her obvious distress. You've made your personal life a cornerstone of your brand. Surely you can handle some scrutiny about it. Jennifer's breathing became slightly more pronounced. Her team off camera was frantically trying to signal the producers, but George seemed determined to push forward with his character assassination disguised as journalism. Let me be very clear about something, Jennifer said, her voice now carrying a warning that anyone with sense would have heeded. My personal life is not your entertainment. My pain is not your content, and my relationships are not your business to dissect for ratings. But they become our business when you put them in the public sphere, George countered with infuriating calm. You can't have it both ways, Jennifer. You can't profit from publicity when it serves you, and then claim privacy when it doesn't. The accusation was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Jennifer's eyes narrowed, and for the first time in the interview, George seemed to realize he might have pushed too far. But instead of backing down, he leaned in even harder. Let's talk about your children, he said, and with those 5 words, he crossed a line that should never be crossed. The moment those words left George's mouth, the entire atmosphere in the studio shifted. It was as if the temperature had dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Jennifer's face went completely still, a mask of controlled fury that was more terrifying than any outburst could have been. Excuse me? She said, her voice so quiet that the audio technicians had to strain to pick it up, but every syllable carried the weight of a mother's protective rage. Your children, George repeated, apparently oblivious to the fact that he had just stepped into dangerous territory. Max and Emmy. They're teenagers now, and they've had to watch their mother's very public romantic life play out in the media. Don't you think that's had an impact on them? Jennifer's hands were no longer folded peacefully in her lap. They were gripping the arms of her chair so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. You will not talk about my children, she said. Each word delivered like a bullet. But surely as a mother, you must consider how your choices affect them. George pressed on, apparently mistaking her controlled anger for weakness. They've seen you with multiple father figures, they've been through multiple relocations, multiple family structures. Child psychologists would argue that this kind of instability can be damaging. Stop, Jennifer said, holding up one perfectly manicured hand. Stop right there. But George, either driven by some misguided journalistic crusade or simply drunk on his own power, refused to stop. I'm simply asking if you've considered the psychological impact of your romantic choices on your children's development. It's a fair question for any parent in the public eye. A fair question? Jennifer's voice rose slightly, the first crack in her professional composure. You think it's fair to psychoanalyze my parenting on national television? You think it's appropriate to suggest that I've damaged my children because I've dared to seek love and companionship? I think it's appropriate to ask these questions when someone makes their family life so public, George replied, his tone maddeningly calm. You've brought cameras into your home, you've featured your children in documentaries, you've made them part of your brand. Surely that opens the door to discussion about their well-being. Jennifer stood up so abruptly that her chair rolled backward. The sudden movement caught everyone off guard, including the camera operators who had to quickly adjust their shots. You have absolutely no right, she said, her voice now carrying the full force of her anger, to sit there and question my ability as a mother. I'm not questioning your ability, George said, remaining seated, which somehow made his position even more condescending. "I'm questioning your judgment." The distinction was meaningless, and everyone in the studio knew it. Jennifer's team was now frantically trying to get the producers' attention, making cutting motions across their throats. But the producers seemed frozen, perhaps realizing they were witnessing television gold, even if it was coming at the expense of human decency. "My judgment?" Jennifer repeated, her voice dripping with incredulity. "My judgment as a mother is to love my children unconditionally, to provide for them, to protect them, and to show them that a woman can be strong and independent and still believe in love. If you have a problem with that, then the problem is yours, not mine. But is it really protecting them when you subject them to this constant media attention?" George continued his relentless attack. "Every time you start a new relationship, they're photographed with your new partner. Every time you break up, they have to read about their mother's heartbreak in tabloids. How is that protection?" Jennifer took a step closer to his desk, her posture radiating barely contained fury. "You want to know what's not protection? Having some sanctimonious news anchor tear apart their mother on live television while they might be watching. You want to know what's damaging to children? Having someone they've never met make assumptions about their family and broadcast those assumptions to millions of people. I think you're deflecting," George said, and with those 4 words, he sealed his fate. "Instead of addressing the legitimate concerns about your children's welfare, you're attacking the messenger." "Legitimate concerns?" Jennifer's voice cracked with disbelief. "From you? What makes you qualified to have concerns about my children? Are you a child psychologist? Are you a family therapist? Or are you just a man with a microphone who thinks he has the right to judge how a woman lives her life?" "I'm a journalist asking questions that reflect public interest," George replied, clinging to his professional dignity even as it crumbled around him. "No," Jennifer said, pointing at him with a finger that shook slightly with rage. "You're a bully hiding behind a press badge. You're using your platform to tear down a woman because you think it makes for good television." The accusation hit its mark. George's composure slipped just slightly, a flicker of something uncertain crossing his face. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. "I think you're being oversensitive," he said, and with those words, he committed the ultimate sin in the court of public opinion. "Oversensitive?" Jennifer's voice rose to a level that made the audio technicians wince. "Oversensitive? A man just questioned my fitness as a mother on national television? And I'm being oversensitive? You're reacting emotionally to perfectly reasonable questions," George continued, apparently determined to dig his grave even deeper. "Perhaps that's part of the pattern we're discussing." The implication was clear, and it was devastating. He was suggesting that her emotional response to his attack was somehow proof of his point about her instability. It was a masterclass in victim blaming, and Jennifer recognized it immediately. "Let me tell you about patterns," she said, her voice now deadly quiet again. "The pattern I see is a middle-aged man using his position of power to humiliate a woman who came here to talk about her business. The pattern I see is someone who thinks he can hide his misogyny behind the guise of journalism." "That's a serious accusation," George said, but for the first time he sounded genuinely rattled. "It's a serious situation," Jennifer fired back. "You've spent the last 15 minutes trying to reduce me to nothing but my romantic relationships. You've questioned my authenticity, my motives, my judgment, and my ability as a mother. And when I defend myself, you call me oversensitive. If that's not misogyny, then what is?" The studio was dead silent except for the hum of equipment. Even the usually bustling crew had stopped what they were doing to watch this train wreck unfold. George looked around, perhaps hoping for some sign of support, but found only uncomfortable faces avoiding his gaze. "I think you're mischaracterizing my questions," he said weakly. "Am I?" Jennifer challenged. "Then let me ask you something, George. When was the last time you questioned a male celebrity about how his multiple relationships affected his children? When was the last time you suggested that a man's romantic history made him inauthentic? When was the last time you accused a father of using his family for publicity?" George opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The silence stretched on, damning in its completeness. "That's what I thought," Jennifer said with bitter satisfaction. "Because you wouldn't dare ask those questions of a man." You reserve this special kind of scrutiny for women, don't you? You reserve this judgment, this moral superiority, for the women who dare to live their lives on their own terms. I think we should take a commercial break, George said suddenly, looking toward the control room. Oh no, Jennifer said, her voice sharp as a blade. We're not done here. The control room was in chaos. Producers were frantically discussing whether to cut to commercial, but the raw drama unfolding on screen was the kind of television that networks dream about. George looked like a deer caught in headlights, his usual commanding presence completely evaporated. We're live, he said weakly, as if reminding Jennifer of this fact might somehow make her back down. Yes, we are, she replied, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. And I want everyone watching to see exactly what just happened here. I want them to see how a so-called respected journalist ambushed a guest who came here in good faith. George tried to regain control of the situation. Jennifer, I think you're overreacting to what was simply a robust interview. Robust? Jennifer laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what you call character assassination now? Robust journalism? She began pacing in the small space next to her chair, her energy too intense to be contained. Let me paint a picture for your audience, George. I came here this morning to talk about a business I've built from the ground up. A skincare line that represents years of research and development. Something I'm genuinely proud of. But instead of discussing my accomplishments, you decided to turn this into a therapy session that I never consented to. Public figures should expect scrutiny, George said, grasping for his last shred of professional authority. Scrutiny, yes, Jennifer agreed, whirling to face him. But what you did wasn't scrutiny. It was a hit job. You came prepared with a list of my relationships like you were reading charges in a courtroom. You questioned my authenticity as an artist and as a woman. And then, when that wasn't enough for you, you crossed the line and brought my children into it. Her voice broke slightly on the word children, and for a moment, the pain beneath the anger was visible. Do you have any idea what it's like to have someone attack your parenting on national television? Do you know what it feels like to have your love for your children questioned by a stranger? George remained silent, perhaps finally understanding the magnitude of what he had done. But here's what really gets me, Jennifer continued, her voice gaining strength again. Your assumption that I owe you, or anyone else, an explanation for how I live my life. The assumption that, because I'm famous, my personal choices are somehow public property. She stepped closer to his desk, her presence commanding every inch of the studio. I've been in this business for over 20 years. I've built an empire. I've created jobs for thousands of people. I've donated millions to charity. I've broken barriers for Latino women in entertainment. But none of that matters to you. Does it? All that matters is who I'm dating, and whether it fits your narrow definition of appropriate behavior. I never said it didn't matter, George protested weakly. You didn't have to say it, Jennifer shot back. You showed it. In 30 years of journalism, this is what you chose to focus on. Not my business acumen, not my artistic achievements, not my philanthropy, my love life. Because apparently, that's all a woman is worth talking about. The cameras captured every moment of George's discomfort. His face had gone pale, and beads of perspiration were visible on his forehead despite the studio's air conditioning. And let's talk about this notion of privacy that you seem so confused about, Jennifer continued, her voice rising again. Yes, I've shared parts of my life with the public. Yes, I've been open about my relationships. But sharing doesn't mean surrendering my right to dignity. Being open doesn't give you permission to be cruel. She paused, letting that sink in before delivering her next blow. You want to know what's really inauthentic, George? A journalist who pretends to care about children's welfare while traumatizing their mother on live television. A man who hides his obvious disdain for successful women behind a facade of professional inquiry. That's not fair, George said, but his voice lacked conviction. Fair? Jennifer's laugh was sharp as glass. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you suggested that my emotional response to your attacks was somehow proof of instability? Was it fair when you implied that I use my children for publicity? Was it fair when you dismissed my accomplishments to focus on my personal life? She was on a roll now, years of frustration with media treatment pouring out in a torrent of eloquent rage. You know what the saddest part of all this is? I actually respected you. I thought you were different from the tabloid reporters and gossip columners. I thought you had integrity. The words hit George like physical blows. His reputation was built on that integrity, and watching it crumble in real time was clearly devastating. But you're not different, are you? Jennifer continued mercilessly. You're just another man who thinks a woman's worth is determined by her relationship status. Another person who believes that success doesn't count if you're female, and you dare to seek love and companionship. She grabbed her purse from beside the chair, her movements sharp and decisive. I'm done here. I'm done being your entertainment. I'm done letting you use my name and my presence to validate your small-minded prejudices. Jennifer, please, George said, finally showing some genuine emotion. Let's try to end this on a more positive note. She turned to face him one last time, and the look she gave him could have frozen fire. Positive? You want positive? Here's something positive for you, George. This interview is going to follow you for the rest of your career. Every time someone searches your name, they're going to see the day you tried to destroy a guest for ratings. Every journalism class is going to use this as an example of what not to do. The prophecy was delivered with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how media cycles worked. George's face had gone from pale to ashen. And here's another positive thought, Jennifer added, slinging her purse over her shoulder. I'm going to take my skincare line, my businesses, my talent, and my dignity, and I'm going to continue being successful while you explain to your bosses why you turned what should have been a promotional interview into a personal attack. She started walking toward the exit, her heels clicking against the studio floor with the rhythm of a funeral march. But she wasn't done yet. Oh, and George, she called out without turning around. The next time you want to question someone's authenticity, take a long look in the mirror. Because nothing about what you did here today was authentic journalism. It was just cruelty dressed up as professionalism. The studio doors swung shut behind her with a finality that echoed through the silent space. George sat alone at his desk, surrounded by the wreckage of what had once been his reputation, while the cameras continued to roll and capture every moment of his humiliation. The control room finally cut to commercial, but it was too late. The damage was done, and everyone in that studio knew they had just witnessed the end of George Stephanopoulos' credibility and the birth of a viral moment that would define both their careers forever. So there you have it. Jennifer Lopez didn't just walk out of that interview, she burned it to the ground and took George's reputation with her. What did you think of her response? Was she right to call him out so publicly, or should she have handled it differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure you subscribe for more shocking celebrity moments like this one. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next in the world of entertainment drama.